I did everything right and they indicted me.
And I don't know what the I'm doing. Antifa!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Katie Halper Show. Such a pleasure, as always, to be with you on a Tuesday night. We are so excited because we have an amazing show for you tonight. We have 3 different segments that we're going to be doing. We are going to be speaking at the end of the show with Nick Bryant, an investigative journalist and an author. He was the first person who published Jeffery Epstein's Black Book at Gawker. We're also going to be speaking to Eric Lee, who's an attorney who represents clients who are right now, as we speak, at Dilley Detention Center, being deprived of their rights. And we are also speaking first with Rahma Zein and Omar Zahzah about technology and censorship and basically Zionism combined with Silicon Valley. So we are really excited. And before we start the show, please do take this moment to like the stream. That's a great way to, speaking of social media and social media companies, a great way to challenge Silicon Valley because they suppress content like this. So please like the stream, give it a thumbs up. Also, if you haven't already subscribed, please do subscribe by hitting subscribe and then pressing the bell. That way you never miss any of our streams. And the reason it's definitely recommended to do this is because we've been doing these extra streams. So like last week we did one with Dr. Mohammed Morandi. We've done them with people in Venezuela. So we highly recommend that you do this because you never know when we're going to do an extra one. And if you can become Patreon supporters, please do become Patreon supporters at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. And if you do that, you'll be able to see, literally, if you haven't already subscribed and you subscribe tonight, you'll have hundreds of hours to watch. And you'll also be able to see our full interview with Nick Bryant about Epstein and Epstein Files. And he himself appears in the Epstein Files, but not in a bad way. In fact, we should do a whole show with him and Norman Finkelstein about people who appear in a good way in the Epstein Files. So thank you so much to the person watching from Ireland, to Pamela. Thank you. Thank you so much to Skywalk saying I was great on Bad Hasbara. Thank you so much for that. And I think we're just going to start the first segment of the show. And we are going to bring on Rahma Zein and Omar Zahzah. Rahma Zein is an Egyptian journalist, podcaster, and speaker now working at Tech for Palestine. And Omar Zahzah is a writer, poet, journalist, organizer, and assistant professor of Arab Muslim ethnicities and diaspora studies in the Department of Race and Resistance Studies at San Francisco State University. And he is also the author of Terms of Servitude, Zionism, Silicon Valley, and Digital Settler Colonialism in the Palestinian Liberation Struggle. So welcome, Rahma and Omar.
Hi, Katie.
Hello.
I'm always very impressed about how you're so able to pronounce the names.
Oh, thank you. I think I messed up Omar. Is it Zahzah? I asked you before, but say it once more.
It's Zahzah.
Okay, it's Zahzah. Okay, and Rahma. Okay, thank you. Well, thank you guys so much because Rahma is a different name from Rama, which is what
we're close friends, so you have to pronounce
my mayor's
well.
Yeah, but my mayor's wife is named.
Oh, yeah.
Zoran's wife is
Rama,
named Rama,
right.
right? Without, yeah. So 2 different names, yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for joining. I'm going to start off by asking, I think, a question to kind of create the context for this discussion. So, Omar, you wrote this really fabulous book that I did read, but I have it upstate, not with me, but I highly recommend it. And as I mentioned, it's called Terms of Servitude, Zionism, Silicon Valley, and Digital Settler Colonialism in the Palestinian Liberation Struggle. And it's about the role of social media in both advancing and attacking the pro-Palestine cause, or the cause of Palestinian liberation. So before we get into the specifics about your book or the specifics about what's happening today as we speak in terms of censorship and tech conglomeration and TikTok, et cetera, can you kind of give us a summary of your main findings and your orientation?
Yeah, definitely. And thank you so much for having me. So the book really was my analysis of the role that social media had played and continues to play in both advancing and suppressing Palestinian liberation-focused narratives. So, I look at how from really 2021, especially that moment where you start to see a lot of activism and organizing coming from the occupied East Jerusalem neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah. You see all these Palestinians taking to social media to talk about, the specifics of their situation. And it just has this impact where the narrative really begins to shift in ways that had been sort of unprecedented prior to that moment. And, I always think it's important also to flag, of course, that the 2020 George Floyd uprisings, I think, really played an important role in making that possible too. But you started to have this broader dynamic of, digital platforms, social media, really allowing for developments and narratives that, had been framed in very limited and at times completely invisibilizing ways in the legacy media or, corporate media, as we often refer to it. So, I looked at how we started to see this ability for social media, however unwitting, not necessarily about the intents of the people behind it so much, but how it had this ability to really kind of allow for scaling back the intense repression and erasure of legacy media. And over time, as the people behind these companies and these platforms realize what's happening, you have an explosion of the exact opposite, which is this massive censorship and restriction. And it is always interesting for me to go back and think about the headlines from 2021, 2022, and compare it to now. But at the time, it was so novel that you had censorship at this scale on specific terms like Sheikh Jarrah, Al-Aqsa Mosque, Gaza, and that you had such a clear, concerted attempt to just ban Palestinians from the digital sphere outright. People having their accounts restricted, banned, and blocked. Now, fast forward to our present moment. You have this ongoing genocide that began in October 2023, but is really ongoing despite what they say about a ceasefire. And it, I feel as though we've reached the moment where this type of anti-Palestinian censorship has really become routine. It's become part of how these digital platforms operate. And so basically, the book is my attempt to put that argument, into a sustained context, and really make the case for how hegemonic social media platforms advance the physical Zionist settler colonial project in the digital realm. And that's what I refer to as digital settler colonialism, kind of building off of, other scholarship about, digital repression and indigeneity.
And Rahma, related to that, can you talk about how you yourself, as someone who is part of the pro-Palestine movement, how you've experienced the censorship that Omar is describing?
Yeah, I think all of us. It's interesting because the censorship offline is reflected online because of just how important the narrative is. They decide who's the terrorist. They decide through narrative to dehumanize you so they can get away with brutalizing you, so that when you read a headline where 300 people have been killed, you don't sympathize. There's no story to the people. There's no naming. So then you have a digital space, as Omar was saying, where people are speaking the truth. I remember I would have lives with a journalist, a Palestinian journalist, Fatin Alwin. She was in Ramallah even. She wasn't even in Gaza. And I couldn't do the lives with her because the lives were blocked. If you were to come to follow me, you'd get a warning. So it would say, are you sure you want to follow this person? They're spreading misinformation. The collaboration button suddenly disappeared. They caused the very Arab cultural African problem by removing some aunties from my followers, and these are all things that you couldn't put into evidence, because then you go off to Meta and they say, oh, this must be a personal issue. Offline, you see students who are studying international law, so they see clear as day children, civilians being killed, men, women, and children. They speak up against it because it's such clear war crimes. They're also shut up. So you're being shut out offline as much as online. And that's just how important it is for them to own the narrative. And then this is when you saw the large exodus off of TikTok, because it is precisely that level of entitlement that causes them to make these audacious statements, such as, and Omar, remind me of the name, Adam, the CEO of TikTok.
Parker, is it Parker? I have a video of him, right?
I think if you're
What is
gonna
he
show
doing?
this video where he basically says if you were in
Presser, Adam Presser. Yes, yeah,
Adam
sure.
Presser, and
Yes.
what they are attempting to do is equate you criticizing Zionism with hate speech.
Yeah, we
Again,
actually,
an attempt to own the narrative.
right.
If you're gonna show the clip, we can
Yeah.
show that and go off analyzing that, because it is exactly this kind of audacious entitlement where he
Well, they
wants
don't
to
even hide it.
appease. Yeah, and he wants to appease the elite, but what they don't realize is the grassroots has already woken up, as Omar was saying. The digital space has aided in that, and they're also seeing the suppression of voices everywhere, which is leading more people to question, to get aware, to get educated, and with that level of education comes action.
Right. So yeah, let's actually take a look at this clip. This is TikTok CEO Adam Presser at the World Jewish Congress in May 2025, and he's talking about something he's managed to do that's a real something he's really proud of. Let's just let him put it in his own words.
Made a change to designate the use of the term Zionist as a proxy for a protected attribute as hate speech. So if somebody were to use...
Sorry, I have to play this from the beginning. A weird thing happens with... Let me play it from
We made a change to designate the use of the term Zionist as a proxy for a protected attribute as hate speech. So if somebody were to use Zionist, of course you can use it in the sense of you're a proud Zionist, but if you're using it in the context of degrading somebody, calling somebody a Zionist as a dirty name, then that gets designated as hate speech to be moderated against. Over the course of 2024, we tripled the amount of accounts that we were banning for hateful activity. We also have, I think, over 24 Jewish organizations that are constantly feeding us intelligence and information when they spot violative trends. There is no finish line. There's no finish line to moderating hate speech, identifying hateful trends, trying to keep the platform safe. There's no such thing as an end game.
Oh, God.
That's so dystopian.
You can be a proud colonialist.
Yeah.
You can say you're a proud colonialist, but if anybody...
Right,
but
yeah.
you know, Omar, it is that
actually that
level
reminds
of
me of it like
audacity.
the frontier, no frontier, right? It's like a
Right.
limitless frontier. Yeah, sorry. Let's keep going, Rahma.
So exactly that. It is that level of audacity, of lack of awareness with just how sick and tired people are of seeing families being burnt alive in the name of Zionism. And it is that dystopian outlook and that level of dehumanization of not just Palestinians but Arabs in the region or the other that allows them to create these statements. And then we were just talking about this exodus, and people are starting, because it's sometimes hard to boycott Meta because it's your alternative, it's what's there. But then you see this young Palestinian father who, in spite of big tech and in spite of their funding and in spite of that, it just goes to show grassroots power creates something such as UpScrolled, which is an alternative media, a social media app, and people just flood into it in millions.
Yeah.
And fair enough, because they're just so sick of being policed. They're just so sick of when you say it's the war criminals are traveling to Sydney, Australia right now. You know, the so-called president of Israel is right now in Sydney. It's being blocked off from actual Australians, and they're the ones that are getting suppressed. The war criminals are giving speeches in the UN. The war criminals are owning TikTok and platforms where you're to speak. And then people are realizing that speaking for Palestine, it's all connected because big tech is also stealing your data. They want safe platforms. They want safe politicians. It's all connected.
Right.
Politicians being allowed to be on the Epstein Files. We've seen nothing so far happen to anybody complicit in the Epstein Files. And yet you're seeing people who are saying, hey, killing kids is wrong, being thrown into jail. So yeah, and we should all then support things like UpScrolled, like the alternative media, like Katie Helper Show, the alternative politicians. So we're not just sitting there thinking, what is there to do? There's so much to do. There's so much to look forward to because people are waking up, and with that awakening comes alternatives.
But it's interesting you mentioned Australia because, of course, there's that brutal, brutal, brutal video of someone just having the crap beaten out of them. And again, this is a kind of brutality that it's not really comparable with what we see in Gaza, but it's still brutal. I mean, we can't let the extremely brutal vaporization, which literally happened. We can't let the exploding bombs over there desensitize us to the lesser brutality here, right? Because it is the domestic face of the same struggle.
It's all connected.
It's all connected, yeah. So, Omar, can you tell us about TikTok in particular? I mean, situated in the larger Silicon Valley context, but tell us about TikTok and who the various figures are. And of course, I've heard you speak about Bari Weiss because she famously targeted Rafat Al-Arir, the poet, translator, writer. So tell us about who the players are.
Yeah, definitely. And before I do that, I also just wanted to respond a little bit to a little more of the video even, and just say very quickly that, I mean, I think this is very familiar to us, and it's probably familiar to your listeners, but I just feel like it's important to keep reiterating that we're seeing a very particular strategy rolled out, which is to rebrand discussions about Palestine or criticisms of colonialism, which is what Zionism is. It's a colonial project and ideology, to rebrand all of that as hate speech, right? And to make decrying genocide, ultimately the thing that's actionable as being hate speech. I think it's a very crude strategy, but it's one that has been very successful in large part because we're seeing bigger platforms kind of run with it, and that signals to the other platforms, that this is what you need to do and you can get away with it, and they are getting away with it. And now in this current political moment, right, it's even worse. But Meta was one of the first big ones, I think, to have their policy on anti-Zionist speech, right? Which of course they did the same thing. We only ban it when it's a proxy. Of course, how is it going to be enforced? It's always going to be enforced as though people are making it a proxy, precisely because those who support the Israeli project do believe inherently that advocating for Palestinian freedom and liberation is anti-Semitism, because Zionism weaponizes anti-Semitism, right? And then, Twitch updated its policies accordingly to do the same, basically to say we have a new policy on the use of Zionist in relationship to hate speech. And so, this has just become really the hegemonic move. This is the standard moderation move that these big tech companies make now. And it makes it much easier to continue to engage in these forms of censorship, precisely because you can have this policy that on its face, right, sounds like it's doing something good, right? It's fighting racism, it's stamping out discrimination. In reality, it's reinforcing discrimination. Right? So it's just basically the pretext for them to be able to continue to normalize these anti-Palestinian censorship even more. Now, TikTok...
And one second, sorry, I want to say, it's so funny, like what you just said is so true. And I'm so used to, I realize that someone, if they're watching the show for the first time, like they may not realize that this is such a trope. There is an attempt, and I forget that not everyone is like keyed in on this. Basically what happens is that Zionists want to conflate anti-Zionism, criticism of Israel, with anti-Semitism, because no one wants to be called an anti-Semite. It's a way to justify this colonialism and the ongoing genocide that's been slowed, but it's still ongoing. And then, of course, beyond, it's genocidal, right? It's a genocidal conflation. And then the irony, much less important, but the irony is, of course, what is going to create more anti-Semitism than claiming that all Jews are a monolith who support a genocide that's being live streamed? So that is just watching that. And I cannot tell you the number of times that I get accused of being a self-loathing Jew or spreading anti-Semitism. I'm like, do you hear yourselves? Like, if you care about anti-Semitism, like I would like you to care about Palestinians, but even out of self-preservation, how can you not get that you should not be applauding what Israel is doing or saying it's in the name of all Jews? But anyway, sorry, back to you, Omar.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But what I was wanted to get at in terms of TikTok is just this is kind of what Rahma was saying earlier too, about the fact that it's so blatant, right? That I think there's a degree of, I think we all have a lot more cynicism in watching these things transpire, because it's just like a level of like cartoonishness, in terms of the evil. But it's very blatant what they're doing. Nobody really, a lot of people, I should say, I would argue even the majority, don't buy the pretext at this point. Yet you had this app that started out, very instrumental to being able to get, footage from Gaza, something that was very also important for, different generations of content creators to start to make their own content relating to Palestine and, just basically dismantling the various tropes that Zionism, which is often very just shoved down our throats, for lack of a better term, through legacy media and through all of our other media, right? You started to see this app being used as a tool for anti-Zionist, pro-Palestinian messaging. And it was, in many ways it took off and became successful for that. Now, there's a lot of reasons. I mean, I think part of it is that it also was an app that kind of represented newer developments and how social media was working. We're kind of leaving the old form, kind of just predominantly text-based sites, getting into video and streaming. And, TikTok really kind of cinched the mold in terms of that. And so it was also very popular among younger users. And of course, so they start these narratives about there being a moral panic. I mean, they start a moral panic about, there being all of these attempts, by the CCP to steal your data and all of these things. This spans back at least as far as 2020, but it's not until you have the genocide in Gaza where, you actually really get a bipartisan and intense kind of, agreement by the establishment to really intervene and do something about this app. You have in 2024, Joe Biden signs, what will become the TikTok ban ultimately, and it gets delayed repeatedly. And now, under the current configuration, you have a consortium of individuals, that includes, you have Rupert Murdoch, kind of goes without saying. You have the Dell Technologies founder and CEO, Michael Dell. And of course, you have Oracle, which is Larry Ellison's data company. Now, Oracle had in fact already been storing the data for TikTok since around 2020, I believe. But now this is like an even more direct form of ownership over the app. And of course, we've been seeing rapidly the impacts of the more heavy-handed forms of censorship. And of course, you have, Ellison's son. You have his legacy media kind of, powerhouse essentially, where they now have appointed Bari Weiss to be the, the editor-in-chief, I believe, at CBS. And so you have now, I think, an interesting development, because when I had started really working on these issues, there had still been sort of this idea of a distinction between social media and legacy media. And to a certain extent, that distinction was very productive because people could really mobilize the tensions between those two things. Now we're seeing really this attempt to have this top-down control of all forms of media from all levels, right? Not just the legacy, but also to have the same elites basically completely controlling the narrative that is expressed on digital platforms. And, I sort of admit that I didn't think it would work so effectively so fast. And yet I do really think we're seeing this moment where you have this, Zionist, colonial, capitalist, big tech elite aligned with all types of reactionary and fascist forces really coming together to completely shut down any and all possibility for anti-colonial expression and other liberation-focused forms of expression. It's very crude, but because there's so much power entrenched in these figures and their projects in this moment, in large part due also to the current administration that we have, the Trump administration, there's just a much more naked form of domination and control. Mm-hmm. And the writing is, beyond being on the wall, yet, we're seeing now that this is one of the huge crises that arises from, a big tech capitalist, imperialist social order that really allows for, domination of this nature. And so, going back to what Rahma was saying about, things like UpScrolled, one solution, I think, is to continue to make alternative forms of media, alternative forms of programming. But, we're the level of the hegemony, I guess I should say, is really expanding, and it's much more saturated than it was, even just a few months ago. And things are very, very fast developing. So we definitely have a lot of our work cut out for us. Let's put it that way.
Right. And Rahma, tell us about UpScrolled as a user. You work with Tech for Palestine, which did have I guess it's kind of can incubate, and it's a hub. So there was a relationship between, just full disclosure, between them and UpScrolled. But you as a user, what are your thoughts on UpScrolled?
So I was extremely heavily shadow banned. The Palestinians that I would do interviews with, very heavily shadow banned. If I were to put a story, so interestingly enough, I have 1 million followers on Instagram. I don't monetize. I don't even understand social media. I don't even like social media. I don't even like technology. But you speak the truth. And there you have it, because people are sick and tired of having their narrative dictated, of having to be spoon-fed Zionism, when they clearly see, light as day, that it is a cult-like ideology that is putting Jews in danger and the world in danger, And so it was just that. So how else are you going to control the truth? You stifle the people who are speaking the truth. And because you're on their platforms, on big tech platforms that are very heavily complicit, it was very easy to shut you up. You post a story about Palestine, you get 3 views. Now, and this was why I went on UpScrolled, because it's harder to boycott if you don't have an alternative. So suddenly I found myself with an alternative. So why not? We keep saying we want change, we want change. You have to play a hand in having this change. And then immediately, I had comments on there of people telling me, we thought you just stopped talking about we forgot about you, because that's how social media works. Even if you've been following someone very loyally for the longest time, you forget about them once you no longer see their posts. It's not a very connective and loyal app. It's very easy for me to make you disappear, and that's why it's also so dangerous. And again, I want to go back to that kind of mentality that Zionists and Zionist sympathizer have, of that entitlement, because it is exactly that level of entitlement that's going to shoot them in the foot. They may spend 170 million on Hezbollah. They may spend all this money on blockbuster Hollywood movies reiterating Israeli narrative and key speaking points. But in mere months of people seeing the actual truth, all of this disintegrated very, very easily, because it was based on lies. And they need to realize, and I hope they don't realize, though, no matter how much money they pour into revisionist history and trying to capture and own the narrative, it's too late. Because people are tying things to their own struggles. So it's not just about being pro-Palestinian anymore. Finally, I'm telling you this as a person outside of the United States. We always used to see this. It's the first time that Americans now see the extent of Israeli influence in American politics. So we were seeing this, and we were screaming for the longest time. But with everything that's happening, it's that very technology that they...
We're literally talking about tech censorship.
Yeah, I guess the wrong people are listening.
Seriously, wow. Okay, we're gonna have to bring back Rahma, but also Omar, I don't know. I texted you a question because I'm not sure. We have an interesting schedule because Rahma's is somewhere it's like very, very late. And I have my next guest has a time commitment. He's an immigration lawyer. Would you be able to rejoin at like 8:05? If not, we can bring you on again, just so, because I don't want to cut it up. So, okay, Rahma, you have the last word for this segment because it's so late where you are. I assume you don't want to stay on for another half an hour.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll give you the final word. And then
final word.
And Masad, stay off of her.
Yeah, for the love of God, I know I'm criticizing big tech, but let me speak.
Yeah.
So honestly, it's all the sum of the parts equals the whole. It's dawned on people are starting to relate the Palestine struggle with their own struggles back home, specifically in the US. They're starting to see that the technology that is used as experiments on Palestinians are coming back home to survey and surveillance them. People are seeing that Meta is not just silencing you, but also stealing your data and using it against you, where you are the product. And people are sick of it. They no longer want to be the product. But I actually want to be hopeful where we should support platforms like UpScrolled and not just people like you and me and Omar who are already very much in the sphere, but the makeup artists, the actors, the people who want to be ethical. Because another thing that Meta was so smart was controlling the money. I don't monetize Instagram, so not yet, but so it was easy for me to speak and I didn't care to lose followers and views. But a person whose livelihood as a quote unquote, what they dub influencer there, who needs brand deals, when they get dropped from brand deals, when they are no longer having the money from TikTok, they're silenced. And these are the people that are sometimes more effective because they're mainstream. They're the ones that are in everyone's home, the fashion designers, the artists, the makeup, you know. And so I think Omar would agree with that we need to fight big tech by actually believing that we can and helping the grassroots movements that are attempting to do something about it and not just use flowery words and big jargon about let's fight the system. No, let's actually organize and do something.
Yeah. Well, that sounds wonderful. Rahma, thank you so much for coming on. Omar, we will see you again tonight if you can do that. And Rahma,
I'm going back to sleep.
Okay,
but
you're
I'll
going back,
call
but
you.
we'll bring you back on another time. And then we, of course, have to get you to tell us all the behind the scenes stuff with your encounter with Clarissa Ward, but that's for another show.
Of course. You already know everything, Erin. I tell you.
Okay.
Oh, online? Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay.
Because Katie is my friend.
Yeah. Full disclosure. Okay. Bye, Rahma. And Omar, we will see you again shortly.
Yes, that sounds good.
So we're going to like kick you out of the studio and you can do whatever. You can have a snack, you can listen, whatever you want to do, and then we'll bring you back on.
Okay, and that's 5 p.m. PT, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks so much. All right. Once again, you're seeing how the vegetarian sausage is made. But we are so excited that we're talking to such amazing people, which means we talked to someone who's right now somewhere where it's 4 a.m. and we talked to an immigration lawyer who has to be speaking to clients about very important things. And speaking of said immigration lawyers, we are bringing on, he's already here right now, and we're so grateful to be talking to Eric Lee. And we've spoken to you before. You've done very important work representing different people who are being persecuted, having their rights violated. Please tell us about the latest things that you're working on. And of course, I'm going to ask you shortly about Dilley Detention Center. But what do people need to know about what's happening right now as we speak?
Well, there's a number of things. I mean, first of all, the conspiracy against pro-Palestinian speech has not subsided. We saw the Third Circuit's ruling on Mahmoud Khalil. Obviously, the news about the immigration judge deciding to terminate the proceedings against Rumeysa Ozturk is positive news. But Yaqub Vihandra, who's one of our clients, is we represent him with Chris Godshall-Bennett and Maria Kari and Sam Hamilton. He has been detained in southern Georgia for over 100 days. It's an extremely important case that doesn't get talked about enough. He was arrested at gunpoint in Dallas on October 7th, 2025, as a result of purely as a result of social media posts that he made criticizing the genocide, criticizing treatment of prisoners of the so-called war on terror. And they are detaining him under a provision that they claim makes him detainable as someone who has endorsed or espoused terrorist views. And an immigration judge ordered him ineligible even for a bond hearing because because quote unquote his views about the treatment of prisoners of American imperialism. Though this case is fully briefed at the Southern District of Georgia, it's very important because unlike the other speech cases, it involves The new issue here is it involves this argument that he himself is a terrorist because of his speech. That was always sort of intimated in Mahmoud Khalil, Mamadou Tall, some of the others, but this is a new front on the attack on free speech, and it's important that people come to his defense.
I mean, I've heard, just full disclosure, like I've heard people who I usually agree with on politics. I can't even remember what they said, but I'm saying this to you because I think it's important, where they're like, well, you know, Mahmoud Khalil is one thing, but this guy, come on, like he should have known better. Like you're even seeing people who claim to believe in these things. It's almost like they're bringing these respectability politics to the issue.
Well, we would be very open and would challenge those people to a public debate about Yaqub's case. You can, if you care to tell me later who those people are, we will debate them. We will explain why they're wrong. But I think that part of what you're saying is if those people knew why he's actually detained, if they'd read the papers in this federal case, they would either change their mind or be exposed as shills for the bipartisan attack on pro-Palestinian speech. And one of the elements of his case, which is so harrowing, is that he has not had the support of the media, of the corporate media in particular, who wrote sympathetically, rightly so, about Mahmoud Khalil and Rumey Sazturk, et cetera. But his case has been essentially kept in the shadows, even though he himself is a photojournalist who would go to events with a press pass and who is detained in part for doing exactly that. He's also, I think, importantly, he is in detention because of his religious views. And the immigration judge who denied him bond said that she was concerned he was dangerous because he attended a community event at a mosque in Dallas to discuss political prisoners. So those of you who are listening, look up Yaqub Vihandra. He's got a GoFundMe. His campaign is on Instagram. He needs support. He needs attention. The other terrible tragedy, obviously, is Leqaa Kordia, who is one of Yaqub's friends. Yaqub was actually organizing for Leqaa, and that was we believe that was one of the reasons why DHS went out and grabbed him at gunpoint on October 7th. So, and she is dealing with an absolute nightmare. Only now some politicians are standing up. They've been silent for almost a year. Some of them now are speaking out after she was essentially disappeared by the Trump administration this last weekend. But it's just another harrowing.
And so tell us about her. And by the way, so this is Yaqub. I just want to put a face to it because that, you know, it's important to have that narrative. And I'm going to show a picture of Leqaa, but tell us about her.
Well, Leqaa is the last of the Columbia protesters who's still in detention. And again, there was a substantial amount of media attention on some of the early cases, which is correct. Don't get me wrong. That's not a criticism of that coverage. But Leqaa has been sitting in a Prairie Land Detention Center in Dallas, which is a terrible place. And she has been, she, as I understand it, has had a seizure, was taken to a hospital. Her attorneys tried to call 16 different hospitals to find out where she was. They could not locate her. Her family was not told where she was. Her health is obviously deteriorating substantially. And, you know, it should be something that is of grave concern, whether she is going to survive this detention. God forbid, but that is how serious this is. And the fact that the government didn't want anybody to know where she was for so long, and that they then sent her right back into Prairie Land instead of releasing her so that she could recover. These are, again, the administration has not pulled back from the attack on free speech. It has not pulled back from its crackdown on non-citizens. There were a lot of Democratic Party politicians who were proclaiming that the Bovino withdrawal from Minneapolis, you know, and the pulling of a couple hundred officers from that city was an expression of the fact that, you know, the Trump administration came to his senses. Right. I mean, that tactical, momentary retreat on that issue is not at all part of a pullback. This is an aggressive, ongoing, rolling, constant coup against basic democratic rights, and these cases are expressive of how absolutely wide awake we have to be to continue to develop this movement from below against the Trump administration and against the longstanding bipartisan attack on non-citizens in this country.
Yeah, and we're going to get back to that question of how the Democrats are coming out as heroes for just saying a couple things, and they don't always even say the right things. But we're going to get into, I want to ask you later, shortly, about what actually needs to happen besides these kind of slogans that we're hearing. I want to bring up a case about, everyone's heard, or probably, hopefully, of Liam Ramos, who is this adorable 5-year-old who was basically kidnapped. And his case has gotten a lot of attention. But I think what I want to show is a clip with Tony Gonzalez, who is a representative from Texas. And I wanted to play a couple things from him. Here he is on Face the Nation, and he's going to basically argue that Liam's family is at fault and shouldn't be allowed asylum because the way they applied for asylum is now illegal under Trump, but it wasn't illegal under Biden, which is when they did that. Am I correct in that that detail?
I'm not sure. You cut out for a minute for me, Kate.
Oh.
I'm sorry. Do you mind repeating that?
Sure. Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, I'll just basically we're about to hear Tony Gonzalez defending the kidnapping of Liam. His argument is that Liam's father applied for asylum in a way that is no longer legal under Trump, but was legal under Biden. So let's take a look at this clip from Face the Nation.
Biden knew exactly what he was doing, and he created this huge
So he's talking about Biden and Liam's father.
mess that now President Trump is there to clean up. And
but he came in the front door. He wasn't sneaking across the border.
Through an app that wasn't vetted, and the bottom line is that they're not going to qualify for asylum. So what do you do with all the people that go through the process and do not qualify for asylum? You deport them. I understand the 5-year-old, and it breaks my heart. I have a 5-year-old at home. I also think, what about that 5-year-old U.S. citizen?
You feel comfortable defending that?
I feel comfortable. We have to have a nation of laws. If we don't have a nation of laws,
they were following the law.
I'd also say this.
That's the rub. It's that a new administration deemed the last administration's regulation not to be legal.
We can be compassionate, and we can also enforce our laws. And I think that's the secret sauce that the administration and Congress must do. Let's enforce our laws, but let's do it in a humane way. The facility in Dilley, I've visited there many times. I've visited dozens of different facilities. It is a nice facility. It's a detention facility for people that are in the country illegally that are about to be deported, but it is a nice facility, nicer than some elementary schools that are in San Antonio.
Advocates have said otherwise, but quickly before.
A bunch of different things. So he's basically arguing that because he did something that is no longer legal, the father, it was legal under Biden, but he should be denied asylum. He also creates this bizarre thing where he goes, it breaks my heart, that 5-year-old, but what about the American 5-year-old? As if there's like some zero-sum game where we can't have both of them in the country. I mean, it made no sense. Unfortunately, she didn't press him on that because that's one of the most ridiculous points. And then he talks about how lovely this detention center is. And do you want to respond to that, or should we show you this video that he actually put out of the detention center?
Well, they create, DHS has billions and billions of dollars. When they have weeks and weeks to create a Potemkin village, they can set one up, but they don't even let Congress members in without 7 days notice, which gives you a sense that if it takes 7 days to hide all the crimes that they're committing inside, what can one say about these professional liars? They trudge this guy out, this Latino guy, the truth of the matter is that, a substantial section of CBP and ICE officers are themselves, Latino and Spanish speakers. There's no identity politics solution to this. But the point is that Dilley is a nightmare. When I get calls from people who are the idea that this is like a public school, maybe that's true, actually, because of the cuts to public education. But, no, it's not true. These are jails. These are not civil detention centers. These are being operated to punish children, to explicitly cause harm. This is no longer a question of negligence. This is a question of deliberate causing of harm to children. Stephen Miller makes this point all the time. They're very explicit and upfront about it. It's about making things so bad, so miserable that remigration, this fascist old concept is going to force all the non-citizens to flee this country fearful for their lives. And those are the conditions that exist at Dilley are part of that. Yeah.
We have video of you trying to get in. I thought we could show that, and then I wanted to show footage showing some of the conditions inside that you weren't able to get, but somehow a network was able to. So here's the footage of you.
I'm outside of the Dilley facility here in South Texas. There's a demonstration of detainees taking place inside right now. We were all asked to leave. There's a drone flying up ahead right now. It's an extremely bizarre situation. You can hear them shouting. Can you hear that? They're shouting, "Let us out, let us out." There's people in blue shirts. Again, there's drones flying up ahead. There appear to be hundreds of people through the crack that I can see. And again, I was here for an attorney visit and they asked me to leave abruptly without telling me why, ordering people who were waiting to stand outside in the cold. And I'll try and keep you updated as to what is happening.
Okay, and then let's see another video of you there.
I'm outside of the Dilley facility here in South Texas. There's a demonstration of detainees taking place inside right now.
This is the one we just saw, right? Yeah.
I'm outside. I'm outside. It doesn't say out here. And I've just been ordered to leave the premises.
Okay, so you were forced to leave your meeting with your client, and then you were not allowed to film outside. And I'm going to ask you more about what happened with your client, but I also want to show this footage that was played that a news network actually managed to acquire. Let's take a look at this, and this is from Dilley. No, Brad, it's the other one. It's BO5, I believe.
Immigration advocates and attorneys have described the conditions in the facility, including saying there's cloudy tap water that has caused stomach issues, soap that has led to rashes, delayed medical attention, and children being held for extended periods of time.
So that is, I think, important contrast with obviously the PR from people like Tony Gonzalez. Tell us what you heard about or observed, the extent to which you were even allowed to get access, what your clients there are telling you.
Every time I get a phone call from a detained, every time I get a phone call from okay, it's getting a little choppy for me, unfortunately. But every time I get calls from clients who are detained at Dilley, I am told of some new horror story that just happened. I was told the last time I spoke to my clients that the 5-year-old daughter has a recurring nightmare where she's trying to run away from an animal, but she can't get away because she's in a cage. The kids have stopped. These are members of the El Gamal family. They've been in detention at Dilley for 8 months, and they didn't do anything. This is because of something that somebody else did, a crime their father/husband committed. But you can't drink the water sometimes. The food is either frozen or it's got bugs in it, or it's just the same old, porridge every day, day in and day out. The kids are begging for pieces of fruit. You're not allowed to bring in candy. I mean, the idea that this is nicer than a school, that's a criminal statement. I wouldn't even wish this on his children. And these are conditions that no adult should be forced to suffer through either, by the way. And I think that point can get lost in the focus on these kids. But this is a place where the guards are verbally abusive, where in my family's case, Habiba Soliman, the 18-year-old daughter, was just separated from her family for making the decision to speak out to the media about her conditions of confinement. So that's how they treat these people in there. You don't have to listen to the lies of Trump and his bootlickers in Congress to understand that this is a crime in annals of American history that parallels Chinese exclusion, the removal of the Native Americans, Jim Crow. I mean, the mass immigration detention on a scale that has existed since the days of Obama is a crime against humanity, and the people who are responsible for it themselves should be prosecuted for waging this attack on democracy. And that's what it is. It's not an immigration issue per se. It's that the Trump administration is using immigrants as the spearhead for their attempt to overthrow whatever remains of democracy in the United States and to establish a police state dictatorship. That's what they're trying to do. And now they're going around American cities and shooting Americans in the head for protesting what they're doing.
I wanted to read a comment, and I'm always conflicted about this, but I actually think this is an important thing to respond to, and I think you'll be able to tell it's not my view, but it's such a common talking point. Someone writes, enforcing the immigration law is now racist. Get this guy out of here. I'm not going to get you out of here. What do you have to say to these points? So you hear this all the time. It's not racist. They broke the law. Sorry, sucks for them, but it's not my problem. Like, what is your response to all these talking points that we hear from people?
Well, it's primarily an attack on the international working class. It's primarily an issue. I mean, how much money you have is a basis for an immigration judge determining whether you can be released from detention or not. In my family's case, they were denied bond by an immigration judge because they lack sufficient assets and property. Okay, how does the immigration system, which is fundamentally set up to criminalize a substantial portion of the international working class who come predominantly from countries that have been the subject of vicious military intervention by American imperialism for over a century? That goes to Latin America, the Caribbean, the Southeast Asia, South Asia, the Middle East, Central Asia, obviously. And so, yes, certainly there's an element of racist vitriol, especially coming from the White House and its spokespersons. But fundamentally, this is a class question. Fundamentally, this is a question of the very existence of the nation-state system at this point is a fundamental question for the international working class to resolve. Because the fact of the matter is that it shouldn't be illegal. It shouldn't be a civil infraction for an individual to try to cross a border to make a better life. And I think it's very important. Just a quick point on this. In 2018, there were big strikes at the maquiladoras in Matamoros, Texas, on just south of the border with Texas, where all the big sweatshops walked out on strike.
And sweatshops, yeah.
Yeah, and they marched to the border with the United States that said, and this also took place in some of the caravans that marched up from Central America to the border too, and they carry banners that says, "We're not criminals, we're international workers." And so I think that's we're not trying to, when the Democrats come out and say we need cameras on the ICE agents, we need a fair immigration. No, we should be fighting for the abolition of the nation state system, for the right, it should be a human right in the 21st century for any human being on the planet, regardless of their criminal record, regardless of whatever their circumstances are, to travel the country freely. I mean, these are all countries that are living in extraordinary levels of poverty, because Wall Street and the major finance capitals in Europe have subjected them for centuries and decades to colonial exploitation and imperialist exploitation. And under capitalism, that's the way things work. If you're asking me my personal view, the only real solution is socialist revolution and guaranteeing the right to free travel for every worker on the planet.
Right. I mean, that's probably not an argument you can make in court, right? So what is I'm not even being sarcastic. What do you say when you're in court? And how do you actually walk this line? Are you ever afraid that you're going to get in trouble in the courtroom because of your what you say?
No, because look, I mean, it's a bourgeois legal system. But there was a revolution in this country 250 years ago that established the Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence, which are some of the most progressive documents ever produced in human history. I always hate it when you hear these, proponents of sort of pseudo-left politics saying that the founding fathers were all evil because they were a bunch of white men. I mean, yeah, they were probably not for trans rights or they didn't live in 2026. And there are many hypocritical elements. Obviously, the slavery question had to be resolved with another revolution. But the point is that, and I'm not saying this in like a patriotic raise the flag,
Sure.
wave the flag way, but in court, you try and defend whatever remains of the democratic rights that were established in those two revolutions. But to the extent that we succeed, and we're good lawyers, we succeed a lot of the time, we free people, then great, we win. But we also are establishing that the problems in this society are not going to be resolved in the courts. This is not a legal system which is going to ultimately defend these basic democratic principles. The Supreme Court is completely rigged. It's run, by basically corrupt fascist politicians, not really jurists, or it's dominated by that element, I should say. And the same goes for the Democratic Party. Anybody who's sitting out there thinking that maybe this time it'll be different, and maybe with a Bernie Sanders or an AOC, there will be some sort of left pressure that leads to no. And especially on the immigration issue, yeah. I mean, Sanders himself was saying open borders is a proposal from the corporations, which is a preposterous and really chauvinistic, really deplorable statement. But point is, yes, the courts are what they are. We'll be the best lawyers. We'll represent our clients, and also to the extent that we can't, the courts are exposing themselves as as not the standard bearers of the rights that the population has to assert. That the working class has to fight for itself to assert. Right. And history shows that that's the only way that any social gains are made anyway. That, I think, is the big lesson to take from these demonstrations in recent weeks is don't trust the Democrats, turn to the working class, form committees in your workplaces and your schools. I mean, it's going to be that type of rank and file organization to fight to defend immigrant coworkers and students. That's the path forward.
And I want to show some images. Here's a drawing that one of your clients did. And for people who are just listening, it says, I am 9 years old. It says our house, and it shows a red house and shows a sun and a tree. Can you tell us about what this is?
Yeah, well, that's a 9-year-old member of the El Gamal family. And she's been in detention for 8 months. And that's the house she wants to go back to. So multiply this by 100, multiply this by hundreds and hundreds, and this is what the kids at Dilley are going through every day. And this particular family, this is the wife and 5 children of the guy who carried out the attack on the peaceful pro-Israeli demonstration in Boulder last year. They didn't do anything.
They have nothing to do with it, right?
They have made public statements condemning that attack by their father/husband. And the Trump administration is pursuing them with a level of vindictiveness that should concern us all. Because
so just their crime is that they were related to this guy.
That's the reason they were detained. That's the reason they were originally subjected to this process called expedited removal, which is deportation without a hearing, which is totally illegal in this family's case because of the amount of time they've been here. It's just patently illegal. We had to get a federal judge to issue an order restraining the government from deporting them without a hearing. And so we've been fighting in the courts. Look, I mean, but this kind of gets to the point. We have been fighting to defend their rights using the legal system to the extent that we can, and we will continue to do so reasonably, diligently, responsibly. But they're still in there, and they're only going to get. I had a conversation with them. I was explaining to them that the mood in the country is changing, and they said, "Well, what's our best chance of getting out? That from the courts or from this movement?" And I said, "Well, in the immediate future, the movement is the best chance, and that's why they're shutting off. That's why they're shutting off access to the internet in these facilities. That's happening now, so that people can't learn about the fact that millions of people outside of these facilities are demonstrating against ICE murdering citizens in the streets." So,
and here's another drawing. Can you tell us about who made this one and what it says? I am
5 years old, and this is a drawing by the 5-year-old girl, member of the El Gamal family. She and her 5-year-old brother have been in detention for about 20% of their lives at this point. They're twins. They've had their 5th birthday. I wouldn't use the word celebrated, but it happened when they were in detention. And I mean, what can one say when you see
images? If you're just listening, it's a few 1, 2, 3, 4 figures, and they have sad faces, and they're behind bars. I mean, it's an awful image.
Yeah, and they're saying "let us out," and I think the the other point, by the way, to be made, just sort of on the political situation and the response to these people. Not a single significant trade union in this country has called for a strike over the attack on democracy and over the suppression of the rights of non-citizens. And you have to understand that. You really have to look at the history. I mean, the American Federation of Labor was one of the leaders of the xenophobic crackdown of the 1880s, 1870s against Chinese immigrants, then Japanese, Filipino, South Asian, and then in the 20s against South and Eastern European immigration, and onward. I mean, even the UAW was so anti-Japanese in the 90s that a guy named Vincent Chin was murdered in Detroit and he wasn't even Japanese.
Of course, I always see that.
But this is I think, because that is really like the development of this movement from below, which is happening. It really has to turn away from the bureaucracies and the Democrats and all of the groups that orbit all of them, and turn to the working class. That's the social force that possesses all the power, and none of these, or that produces all the wealth. None of these problems are going to be resolved without addressing the basic issue in this society right now, which is the concentration of wealth in a tiny handful of oligarchs who are engaged in levels of criminality that the Epstein Files probably only scratch the surface of. And they are, and you cannot break down the police state apparatus, the crackdown on immigrants, the whole corporate media, bipartisan conspiracy against basic democratic rights without the working class. This has to be a movement which is led by the working class. That I think is the answer.
If though, and I know you have to run, so if the Democrats, so even within this bourgeois political structure, if the Democrats were serious about reform, like not getting rid of capitalism, not having real democracy, but just if they actually cared about improving the lives of of undocumented people, what would they do that they're not doing? Because obviously, like, the body cams is kind of a joke.
Well, I mean, it's not like, what are they not doing? It's like, for 200 years, this party has been an anti-immigrant party. This is the party of Chinese exclusion. This is the party of the Johnson-Reed Act was bipartisan. The National Origins Quota Act in 1924, which set up, the racial and hemispheric-based immigration bans. There was a brief period in the 50s and 60s where there was somewhat of a liberalization on the issue of immigration, and then the Democrats, actually was Barbara Jordan, Democratic Congresswoman from Texas, who pioneered the Democratic Party's turn to outflank the Republicans on the right on the crackdown on immigration. Clinton was the one who signed IRA, and EDPA in 1996. All the Democrats, with maybe a few exceptions, voted for both of those pieces of legislation, which immigration lawyers are, screaming about every single day for a million different reasons. You could go on and on, but the point is that it's not a question of what they could be doing. It's a question of this is an imperialist political party. It's not suddenly going to change its tune. And people need to abandon all of the illusions that they have that there's some magical, potion that some Democrat is going to drink and suddenly become, turn this reactionary party of nonstop war and attacks on immigrants into something that it isn't. I mean, it's just dreaming, and it's time that people just sort of get serious about history. I mean, Americans don't have a problem doing things in this country, but they do have a problem about knowing why they're doing them. And you can't really take a lazy approach to politics. I think that the lesson that I would really have for people: study the lessons of history, study the lessons of the October Revolution, the betrayal by Stalinism, the Spanish Civil War, the Chinese Revolution, how Hitler came to power. I mean, Trotsky's writings on these questions are extraordinary, and I think people really should turn to these historical lessons, because if you don't have a understanding of why we're here, then you don't have a map for fighting forward, and that, I think, is the big task. People have to get serious about politics and start to read. I mean, start to read politics, and I mean, I read the World Socialist website. You know that, Katie. People should read the World Socialist website every day, but
And what is Mamadou Tal's status, by the way?
This is time to get serious. We're dealing with it. I mean, Mamadou was, by the way, he was just coming home to his home country in the UK, and he was Schedule 7. They took his devices. They called him a terrorist.
And this is another client of Eric's who we had on the show. Yeah. So yeah,
and he was one of the first to be targeted with Mahmoud Khalil. Yeah.
Well, we will have to. I know you have a meeting, and we went over. So I thank you for your time, and we'll have to have you back on to talk more about these very important cases and revolution.
Thanks, Katie.
Too. Okay. Thank you, Eric.
Don't forget it. Okay.
Right.
Talk later. Bye.
Have a great night. Bye. That was really important context. The problem is I could talk about that for hours, and then he would miss his meeting, and who knows what happened to whoever he's representing. But also, we are so lucky because we're going to be bringing Omar back onto the show. We have such great guests tonight. If you haven't already liked the stream, please do, because we are so honored to have these amazing guests. Let's see, Omar, when you are ready, just let me know and turn on your oh, there we go. Okay, so if you're just joining late, we are bringing back onto the show Omar Zahzah, who's a professor, and he wrote an excellent book called Terms of Servitude, Zionism, Silicon Valley, and Digital Settler Colonialism in the Palestinian Liberation Struggle. Okay, so welcome back, Omar. Hi, thank you so much for coming back.
Yeah, thanks for bringing me back.
Of course. So let's see, we because it was you and Rahma, and I was having a great time talking to both of you, but it's hard when you have two guests to give people enough time. So we're definitely going to have Rahma back on. But sorry, I keep changing the way I say her name. It's it's pronouncing like it's a Spanish name. And then anyway, but I'm going to call her RZ. So I want to ask you more about TikTok, because you started talking about TikTok. And I want to ask you specifically about Larry Ellison. And we actually have a video of Larry Ellison talking about his connections to Israel. And his company's relationship with Israel. And this is from a 2014 Friends of the IDF Gala in Beverly Hills. Reportedly, he was the largest donor there. He donated around $9 million. Let's take a look at this video. And of course, and just for people just tuning in, can you tell us in a sentence or two who Larry Ellison is?
Yeah. So Larry Ellison is the owner, basically, of one of the main figures, basically, behind the data company Oracle, and essentially had a lot of government ties, working for essentially what was really reported to have been a very intelligence aligned technology venture. Right. And so what we're seeing now in terms of Oracle and its current initiatives, its investments, its deals with things like OpenAI, and the consolidation of the media landscape that we see with the TikTok deal, and the streamlining of AI surveillance to be a full part of that, basically should be very alarming, because of the extensive government ties and literally the overlap in terms of projects and operations that we'd seen historically. So I guess for listeners who are tuning in, very huge tech mogul, very, very wealthy, who basically, earned his chops in these government-aligned projects that, led to the fortification of one of the largest tech companies, very entrenched, having hands in all of these different aspects. So it should be very, very alarming that somebody now has so much control over all of these different aspects. And I should say, I don't know if you're going to show this clip, but he's very infamous for his extolling of AI and perpetual surveillance. Basically, this idea that the more you watch people, the less likely they are to do something wrong. If we can have an AI aligned perpetual surveillance of the populace, then you're basically going to have a reduction in crime. So just massive, constant, sort of like sci-fi level evil types of attitudes toward how tech should be applied to really circumvent, people's rights. And it's not a very far stretch to think of that vision from what we're already seeing being implemented in terms of the consolidation of platforms, in terms of the way that surveillance is operating, in terms of how you have these tech companies in general already very aligned with, institutions, agencies like ICE. Like, we're already seeing, this direction of using surveillance and having data kind of be the median point through which that access is made, and having it operate on just a much more massive scale.
Right. Okay, so we are going to get to that AI video, surveillance video, but first we're going to watch Ellison praising Israel. Then we'll get to the other one.
What is your connection to Israel?
Well, the renewal of the Jewish state is something that I think touches all of us. For 2,000 years, we were a stateless people, and now we have a country of our own, defended by all the brave men and women of the IDF. So anything we can do to support them, who devote their lives for preserving the state of Israel, keeping the people safe, and allowing our state to continue sometimes in very, very difficult situations.
Did you visit Israel?
I have been to Israel. I have been to the border. I have spent time to the people who govern the state of Israel, and I feel a deep emotional connection to the state of Israel and the Israeli people.
You are an high-tech person. What do you think about Israeli startups and high-tech phenomena?
Oh, well, after Silicon Valley, there's an area, Herzliya has probably got more startups than any other place other than Silicon Valley in Northern California. So we've actually acquired a number of Israeli companies. We have 2 CEOs at Oracle. One's name is Safra Katz, and she was born in Israel. So again, we love the country of Israel, and we'll do everything we can to support the country of Israel.
We recently hear that many people criticizing Israel, especially after the Gaza operation. How do you feel as someone just saying we love
So
Israel?
this was the 2014 Gaza operation that they're talking about, not the most recent one.
Well, again, it's a difficult situation, isn't it?
Isn't it?
To conduct military operations around civilians is very difficult, and of course, there were tragedies, and civilians were hurt. That's a terrible thing. But one thing we know for certain, that the Israeli army did everything they could to minimize civilian casualties. And in that regard, they've done a much better job than a lot of other armies all over the world throughout history.
So the classic, all the greatest hits talking points. Although he does, and this I guess is newer, that they don't do this anymore. They now don't even acknowledge any I mean, it's almost shocking to hear any civilians acknowledged, the killing of any civilians being acknowledged. That is, they usually pivot away from that. He acknowledged some of them, then of course lied and pretended that they do everything they can not to kill them. But so what are your thoughts on hearing that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things. It's basically like, the greatest hits, of Zionism, yeah, exactly, and fealty, to this colonial state and project. But I mean, it's obviously not surprising. Ellison is somebody who I think, even for an already very Zionist aligned industry, is kind of outstanding in terms of his connections, his devotion, right? So I think that, to me, that clip definitely reflects that there's nothing kind of affected about this, right? It's very deep seated. It's very material. You mentioned that investment. He's one of, if not the largest donors at that point, right? From what he had made. And I think it also very clearly suggests that there's no distinction between Israeli interests and between, the workings of his own projects, right? I mean, those are the things that I think we can glean, right? The nod to the Israeli CEOs, the fact that we are essentially Israel, right, is what those comments really reflect. And it's just very concerning. I mean, I'm going to keep coming back to that, this idea that there's so much emphasis on protecting the interests, the ambitions, the designs, the desires, of the Israeli project, of the Israeli state, and being so open about this within a context where you are part of an institution and an industry that has so much outsized control over people's lives, right? I mean, I think that should be something that really concerns, if not outright chills, all of us. I mean, I had mentioned the ties, that Oracle had in the beginning, but I'll just state it a little more directly because I think I kind of went a little roundabout. But you have Oracle founded in 1977, and it's co-founded by Ellison, but there's also Robert Minor and Ed Oates. And in fact, the CIA had been its first client, right? And in fact, that name emerges from one of its projects, from one of its first projects. And this is all from reporting by Sam Husseini that I really recommend people look into. He's been doing a really great job getting the receipts on how far back these ties go. But all of that's to say, to return to the initial point, we have this intelligence aligned, tech mogul, very, very out and proud Zionist, very upfront about the fact that the workings of his company are in direct accordance, with the desires and the dictates of the Israeli state, and proud of the fact that there's so many Israelis directly connected with it, is this huge donor to the Friends of the Israeli Occupation Forces. So, again, I'm going to use a phrase that I used earlier, but I think just thinking about tech in relation to Palestine just makes it so resonant. I think the writing is really on the wall, right?
Speaking of silencing, I was muted. Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah. And we have this other Ellison clip that we can watch where he's talking about AI and surveillance.
Police will be on their best behavior because we record.
Wait, sorry.
The police will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording, watching and recording everything that's going on. Citizens will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording and reporting everything that's going on. And it's unimpeachable. The cars have cameras on them. I think we have a squad car here someplace. But those kind of applications using AI, if we can use AI, and we're using AI to monitor the video, and if there's a problem, AI will report the problem and report it to the appropriate person, whether it's the sheriff or the chief or whomever we need to take control of the situation. We have, same thing. We have drones. We just, if there's something going on in a shopping center, and I'll stop. A drone goes out there, get there way faster than a police car. There's no reason for, by the way, high-speed chases. You shouldn't have high-speed chases between cars. You just have a drone follow the car. I mean, it's very, very simple. And the new generation of autonomous drones.
Okay.
Very simple. Very simple.
Yeah, that's he's not mincing any words. Was it last week we went over the fact that the Epstein Files revealed a real relationship between Ehud Barak and Jeffrey Epstein. They were quite close to each other. Ehud Barak, the former prime minister of Israel. We also have audio where Jeffrey Epstein is giving Ehud Barak Peter Thiel's name, misspelling it, talking about Palantir. What can you tell us about this relationship?
The relationship, you mean between Thiel and between Epstein, or
or Thiel and Palantir in Israel, and really anything, because I obviously it's impossible to keep up with all the Epstein revelations. So if you know about those, then that's great. But if not, just more generally, Israel and Palantir and Thiel.
Yeah. Well, I can start by getting into some of what I know about the relationship between Thiel and Epstein, and I think from there we can take it to Palantir. But there's some reporting that came out of Forbes and Wired, that kind of went into this a little bit. And I think, for lack of to kind of just break it down very simply, Thiel and Epstein were clearly close. I mean, he was reported by Wired, to be I believe the third most cited correspondent basically in these files. So they definitely had a relationship that went back for quite a while. And it's also kind of interesting to think about because, according to this reporting in Forbes, in 2010, apparently Epstein had been approached to start talking about Silicon Valley investments. And he said that, well, I don't actually know much about that. But by 2016, he was saying, I have so many friends in this world ultimately. So, I mean, basically the industry is very, very well represented, but we do know, right, that you have very extensive correspondences between Thiel, between Epstein. There had been invitations even for Thiel to come out to the island several times. We don't have confirmation on whether or not, that occurred as far as I know, but the invitations were definitely there. And I think some people make a lot, or some reporting is making certain assumptions about the fact that, for all of his connections, it doesn't seem like Epstein invested as much into this industry as you would think he would, particularly in relationship to Thiel. Again, there's this reporting that said that perhaps that Thiel had, even suggested he not invest in Palantir or in Spotify, which is kind of strange on its face. But I think also the significant thing is not just the literal moving of money, it's the actual connections between these individuals, right? This is a very entrenched elite of individuals, who represent really the intersections of the, kind of the creme de la creme of the Zionist state, the Zionist political project. You have the top political figures, and you have the tech world, right? Which is very, very entrenched in the Zionist project as well. So, there's definitely a very strong connection. And so, we know that among other things, Palantir as a company, right, is basically soaked in many ways in the blood of Palestinians, through projects like enabling, the AI targeting in Gaza, among other things, and, really helping to facilitate a lot of the, streamlining the military operations of the occupation forces, which, has really become just an outsized role of the tech world, especially during this latest genocide. And, you were talking earlier about how it was interesting that in Ellison's comments, he at least nods to civilians, and you don't really need to do that at this point either. I think, we see that kind of collapse playing out semantically, but we also see it in terms of the level of operations, because I think one of the other really horrific aspects of this moment is that it has become not only possible, but even rewardable for the giants of the tech industry to really help the Israeli state hone and fortify the ways that it commits genocide. How do we make the genocide easier? How do we make it smart? How do we digitize it, right? And so at this point, it's more surprising to think about a tech force that would not be aligned with not just the Israeli state, but with the genocide. And and I just, one more point about that, like regarding tech in general, we're also seeing how their companies are so involved that what we're discovering is not just their literal involvement, but the ways in which they're involved that, kind of complement what we've already known previously. So one example of this is for Electronic Intifada, a few months ago, we broke a story. Sorry, that's my light going out. But we broke a story basically about how Dell Technologies, now Dell is obviously a very Zionist company, the founder, CEO, Michael Dell, very out and proud Zionist. At the same time, given its already extensive record, right, we found even more things, right, which is basically like how Dell not only has all of these locations and different projects, to fortify Israeli military violence, but it also provides hardware that is used in running the AI targeting programs like Lavender and the Gospel, right? So oftentimes reporting usually focuses on more of the software element or the storage space regarding, those AI programs. But we found that Dell is also using providing hardware that is used to run those programs. And just, for those listeners that may not know, those AI programs like Lavender and Gospel, they're the AI generated basically kill lists of Palestinians and strike lists for, Palestinian locations. So, just this, is a very, very bloody industry, for all of the hype about disruption, for all of the hype about, making things smarter, about convenience. In reality, the only thing that's really being streamlined is, Palestinian death, destruction, decimation, and dispossession.
Well, that's actually a perfect segue, because we have a clip of Alex Karp, the CEO of Palantir, and he's actually talking about civilians, precisely about this issue. This is a clip from the Hill and Valley Forum in April of 2025. And obviously, he's being interrupted by a protester.
Oh. Yeah. And, well, do you want to hear my answer? Sure, go ahead. Okay. So, I think the primary cause of death to Palestinians. Okay. Do you want to hear the answer, or do you want to yell? Well, you don't want to hear an answer? Obviously. So the primary source of death in Palestine is the fact that Hamas has realized that there are millions and millions of useful idiots that will.
Can we get security up there?
Mostly terrorists. That's true.
So, yeah, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's horrific. This just like completely inhuman. It's monstrous. But I think a lot of it, obviously, there's a lot of impunity in the industry at large, and also reflected in that scene, right? I mean, this person is he's very well insulated, but that impunity, just kind of allows him to be as cavalier as he really wants to be, right? Even that kind of last jibe that he has to get in at the end, basically, mostly terrorists, like, yeah, your people are all terrorists, essentially, right? I mean, it's just, it's hard for you not to feel your blood boil watching something like that.
Yeah, right.
But
So
I mean, of course, it's also the logic that they're operating under, right? We know that what he said, it's not even the quiet part. It's just the thing that's constantly that is out loud, right? Is that this is how they're operating. They're using these logics to actually implement the mass murder, that this protester, and really great for this protester. I think that was very inspiring, what they were talking about.
Yeah, just disgusting. And then can we get security? That the guy, they're such cowards. Like, you can't take being asked a question. Well, wanted to show another clip because in case anyone's skeptical about one of the reasons that people feared TikTok, and again, this is a whole new thing because now TikTok is not allowing as much content to appear. It's throttling pro-Palestine content, or it's removing it entirely. But in case anyone was skeptical about the claims that there were people who were afraid of TikTok precisely because it was showing footage of Palestinians, or not just footage of Palestinians, but also like a lot of straight to camera videos where people are kind of explaining settler colonialism or Zionism. Here is a clip. This is from May 2024. It's Mitt Romney speaking at a forum at the McCain Institute in Sedona, Arizona. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken was there, obviously, and he's asking why Israel and the U.S. have been, quote, so ineffective at communicating. And so let's take a listen, especially given that, quote, typically the Israelis are good at PR. So let's take a look at what Mitt Romney has to say.
Typically, the Israelis are good at PR. What's happened here? The way this is played out on social media has dominated the narrative. The emotion, the impact of images dominates. Some wonder why there was such overwhelming support for us to shut down potentially TikTok or other entities of that nature. If you look at the postings on TikTok and the number of mentions of Palestinians relative to other social media sites, it's overwhelmingly so among TikTok.
So there you have it.
Yeah. I mean, it couldn't be even more spelled out for us, right? I mean, I mean, this is, you have it all just literally laid out for you there. And I mean, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where it's really not until, you have this latest genocide by Israel and the use of TikTok, to basically be spreading more information and videos and recordings, as well as for people to do their own organizing around Palestine, that the attempt to really create a moral panic around this app actually works and takes off, right? So, I mean, it hasn't been very long since we've had, the new TikTok arrangements under the deal introduced, and already we're seeing just a massive shift in terms of the censorship culture, in terms of these officials who are appointed to, do content moderation, in terms of the companies, the new configuration of the company, we should say, their, proud kind of declarations of, this is what is going to be considered hate speech at this point in time. Of course, people are pointing out other things too, like, there had been reports that, people had been unable to send DMs related to, the Epstein Files, right?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Right.
Yeah, and then also the the banning of ICE videos, right? And I mean, it's interesting because all of these things, I mean, this is exactly what we've seen play out in relation to Palestine. And now I think we're just seeing that this is just mass censorship, right? The same thing, when you started to have this mass suppression of Sheikh Jarrah, in 2021, 2022, did, social media posting about that, about, the incursions into the Al-Aqsa Mosque. These companies said we're having technical issues. What is TikTok saying now? Well, there was a power outage. This is not about direct censorship. It's just this. And, I think, we're just going to keep seeing a lot more of that. And, it shouldn't be that surprising given what we've heard the people behind the current configuration of the company say they want to do.
Right. Well, Omar, this has been really inspiring. And one of the things I heard you say during an interview, which I also found really inspiring, was you said something about how I think it was like a Zoom. It may have been a webinar or something, but you talked about how it's easy to get hopeless and pessimistic, and then you ask yourself, well, who does that serve, to kind of give into despair, which I thought was a great answer, because it really doesn't. It's not, I don't blame people for feeling those feelings, but I do think that it's kind of like the least we can do is not give into that, because I think, as you said, it doesn't serve Palestine or the people of Palestine.
Absolutely. I mean, in fact, it serves Zionism. It serves, U.S. fascism. It serves, because you're doing the oppressor's work for them. Like you've kind of just done the final thing that's left, right? And that's why, I mean, what Rahma was saying earlier too, like we really need, the outrage of people to be channeled into ongoing efforts.
Right.
We do know that we're very much outmaneuvered on some level, but that doesn't mean that there are not things that we can do, right? Just because there's a lot, that there's a huge power imbalance and it's not in our favor, there's a lot of unpredictability still in terms of what we can do when we channel our outrage into action. And that all begins with not letting ourselves give in to the despair that, of course, we're going to feel from time to time.
Right. And can you tell us about your own background, your family's trajectory? Because I know you're Lebanese and Palestinian, and
yeah. So
identity.
definitely. My parents are Lebanese Palestinian. My grandmother on my father's side was born in Haifa, and her family was driven out during the Nakba in 1948. And on my mother's side, her father is Palestinian, but they were driven out earlier during the 1936 uprisings. So each parent has a Palestinian parent, from different points of times of dispossession and locations, but definitely still very connected. So yeah, it's interesting. Yes.
And do you have family still there?
Yes, yeah. We we have the family on my mother's side are still in Nablus. My grandmother's family, most of them, went to different places afterwards. So some were in Lebanon, and then other places in the Middle East. One was in Saudi Arabia. So they kind of spread out basically.
Right.
But
nice, yeah. And so, what's it like for you? It's the personal, obviously, political. You're an academic. I'm not. You are an intellectual. So I'm not like reducing you to your experience, but it must be quite, I know you talk about this in the book, but it's challenging to write about this stuff, knowing that you have family there, but also you have this relative privilege. How do you navigate that?
Yeah. No, I appreciate you asking that, because, I definitely feel it on multiple levels. One is, there is definitely the familial connection and the connection in terms of identity, but I think there's also the connection that comes from, having been doing work with others, on Palestine or things related to Palestine, and, being in touch with Palestinians from various parts of Palestine as well. All of which is to say that when you're doing this type of work, there is always a kind of pressure that comes with it, because it's really not just about you, it's also about the cause overall. So I definitely always felt that I wanted to do it, as intentionally as possible and in a way where it's really not about me as an individual or my individual benefit, but for something that is actually benefiting the movement, benefiting the cause, right? So, but yeah, it's definitely something you're always negotiating, and to a certain extent, I think that's a good thing because you don't want to get too complacent or too comfortable.
Right. Yeah. Well, anything else you want to say? And I'm so glad that we made this happen, and I've been wanting to for a while, and we'd love to have you back. But anything you want to add for this appearance? And again, if I had the book, I'd be holding it up. It really is great, but it's upstate. And my friend actually stole it from me upstate. So it's not even at my parents' upstate. It's someone else's upstate. But I did read it. Anything else you want to say before we wrap for tonight?
Well, I think it's just that, I think our conversation has reflected how Palestine in many ways really is the canary in the coal mine. And I think, we've seen everything just become more blatant and explicit. And so the things that were the exceptions that were used for Palestine are now kind of, business as usual for everything in this moment in time. And that's not by accident.
Right. Well, again, thank you so much, everyone. Buy the book. Also follow Omar on Twitter. And you have to I think I DM'd you. You have to put your book in your Twitter bio.
Oh, yeah. Thanks.
People will go there and they won't know about it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I relate to Rahma about this. Like, I write about social media, but I'm not super good at it. So
yeah,
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, please do come back on again. And thanks for everything that you do.
Would love to. Thank you.
Great. Have a great night. That was great. Wow. What wonderful guests we had. And, the show isn't even over because I'm going to play another interview, but I just do want to thank everyone who's watching. I really want to thank those great guests, Rahma and Omar, also Eric. And so important to be hearing from people who are fighting the good fight on different levels and different areas and fora, whether it's in the courtroom, / obviously for Eric, it's not just the courtroom. It's also raising the consciousness of the working class or through academia or through activism and academia and writing. And Rahma is she's an influencer for good. She's many things, but just having 1 million followers on Instagram and with her perspective is a very powerful tool. And she yelled at Clarissa Ward, which is great. So we are going to we've come to our final segment for tonight. And again, if you haven't already liked it, please do like it and please do subscribe because we keep doing these extra streams, which are great. This is I'm going to now play part of an interview that I did with Nick Bryant. We've had him on the show before, and he is an author, activist. He published Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book in 2015. He's the founder of Epstein Justice, and he's also the author of The Franklin Scandal, A Story of Power Brokers, Child Abuse, and Betrayal, as well as The Truth About Watergate, A Tale of Extraordinary Lies and Liars. And as you'll see, Nick himself is mentioned in the Epstein Files. So without any further ado, here is part of my interview with Nick Bryant. To catch the full interview, you can find that at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. And someone in the chat wrote, "What does Brad say?" So we'll have to ask Brad for his opinion after the Nick interview. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, it's great to be with you.
Under not very great circumstances, obviously, because it's positive that these things are being released. But before we get into kind of the nitty gritty, tell me your general impressions of what this latest dump reveals.
Well, it's horrific. Some of this material is truly horrific. Some of it, they're speaking in codes, which probably indicates that it might even be more horrific than when they're not speaking in codes. And then it shows what a mover and shaker Epstein was. He had connections to Mount Olympus. And we see that with other emails. There's Dropsite News has emails from Epstein to Ehud Barak for 3 years. And those emails really show how just plugged in Jeffrey Epstein was with not only Israeli power brokers or American power brokers, but with power brokers around the world.
Right. And what did you know before versus what you know now when it comes to people like Ehud Barak, for instance, former Prime Minister of Israel?
Well, I've known a lot about Ehud Barak for quite some time because I got to know Virginia Jeffery, and she had told me about him. And what she had said was very, very, very unsavory. And then I've got emails of him from that other tranche of emails from Dopsite News putting together arms deals with Epstein. And they actually sell like a big brother surveillance to an African dictator. I'm sure that that's going to have a very negative outcome for a lot of people in that particular African country.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. They've really made quite the effort to portray Epstein's connections not to Israel, but to Russia.
Yes.
I mean, it's almost comical.
Yeah, and I think that the mainstream media is trying to swing it that way too.
Definitely, yeah.
So yes, they're trying to get Epstein. That Epstein was a FSB agent, and he had nothing to do with Israel or the United States.
Right. Yeah. So, what were the most surprising things for you to come about through this dump? I mean, you yourself were mentioned.
Yes, in a good way.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say I should apologize because I had said on my last show that there were two people who came off well in the Epstein Files, and that was Norman Finkelstein for basically saying that, I don't know if you saw this amazing exchange, but he said that, that Epstein and Dershowitz, I think, should be throttled. And then Bernie Sanders, because Lawrence Summers was complaining that his kids liked Bernie Sanders. I'm going to do a screen share of your own appearance. 2 days ago, I posted an email about one of Epstein's redacted minions putting out an all points bulletin on me with an accompanying picture, warning that they should be aware of me. That email was followed by 2 emails about me. The next email was from one of Epstein's henchwomen, Leslie Groff, and sent to a redacted name with the following subject: alarm. Remind J.E. to call Nick Bryant. So remind Jeffrey Epstein to call Nick Bryant. A third email from Groff to Epstein said that Epstein should call me. What's strange about the third email is that Epstein's email is redacted because his email address is never redacted. Epstein never called me, but I'm nonetheless grateful that I was able to alarm the scumbags. And then here it is. Just a heads up, there's a journalist calling around again. His name is Nick Bryant. This is what he looks like, so you are all aware. Reminder to call him. Then there are a bunch, Bill Scherer, who's also a journalist, Saul Werman, Mark Packer, Chris Knight, Barbo, Nick Bryant. So those, I guess, were all the people who they wanted to be him to call. I assume to perhaps dissuade from talking about it.
He never called me, so I never had the pleasure of talking to him.
Right.
I'm sure it would have been a memorable phone call.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that's so disturbing about this is that there's obviously going to be, and I feel like it's important to say this up top, and I've said this, there's obviously going to be some stuff that's not real. That was either just claims that were made that we now know are not real, or things that are inserted there intentionally, I think, to poison the well. What do you have to say about that, just so people can kind of be aware and vigilant of that?
Well, these things that they are talking about, or a lot of these evils, I mean, I've heard them over the years, but one has to be cautious when treading in certain areas. Like, here's an email from UCLA neuroscientist Mark Tramo. He's got an MD and a PhD, and he's emailing Epstein, and he's talking about ways that he can enhance a baby to suck. And actually, UCLA has let go of him. So I think that's about as evil an email as you can come up with. And I think that because that particular email is being sent to Jeffrey Epstein, it's difficult to conclude otherwise.
Right. And because they let him go, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the problem is that, and I'm just going to show this because it really, I mean, there's going to be a lot of trigger warnings from this because it's obviously incredibly disgusting. But, you know, one of the things that is, I think, also dangerous about this or is how they seem so unbelievable. It's going to be so easy for people to dismiss this as too far-fetched to be real. But I mean, obviously these things, some of them are real. Hi, J.E. Thanks for sending Richard Johnson my way. I trust the kind words I shared with him are acceptable to you. If not, please let me know ASAP. I'm on the road. My cell is okay. then I hope you realize this recognition for all you do for so many, opinion overdue and well-deserved. Cheers, Mark. P.S. Was just reading today that newborns will suck on a pacifier more vigorously if it triggers playback of a recording of his mother's voice than another woman's voice. Have you read David Brooks' Social Animal? Was #1 at New York Times Books for quite a while. Mark Tramo, MD, PhD, Department of Neurology, David Geffen School of Medicine at UCLA, Department of Musicology, UCLA, Herb Alpert School of Music Director, the Institute, for Music and Brain Science, Co-Director, University of California, Multi-Campus Music Research Initiative. And Mark Tramo writes again, P.S. Richard Johnson just wrote to me to tell me his editor decided not to run the piece. Here's what Richard wrote. Sadly, my editor thinks too much has been written about Jeffrey and is spiking the story, or that's the Mason I was given.
They have problems with typos, the Epstein class. I mean, I have problems with typos, but mine are pretty minimal compared to the Epstein class.
Well, also, you don't claim to be a genius. I mean, I'm not saying you're stupid, but it's rich when these people who claim to be so intellectually, beyond us mere mortals. It's kind of ironic when they are bad spellers.
I get a kick out of. I was dyslexic as a kid, and although I've written books, it's kind of funny where my dyslexia shows up is when I'm trying to spell. So maybe they were dyslexic as kids too. I'm not sure.
I mean, I was actually going to say not even just say this to be like because of what you just said, but bad spelling is hardly a sign of unintelligence. I just think that they probably would see it that way, right? Because they're such snobs. And I know very brilliant people who are dyslexic.
With these guys, they're in their own world, and it's a very horrific universe. And I started digging into Epstein in 2011, and that's when the All Points Bulletin went out on me. And I wrote a book about another trafficking network that almost is kind of like Epstein is kind of a carbon copy of that work. It's called the Franklin Scandal. And I came across horrific content when I wrote that book. And I've subsequently spoke at various conferences about child trafficking. And the content of these emails is known by a number of therapists that counsel extreme abuse victims and trauma victims. And there's a great study. It's called the Extreme Abuse Survey. And your audience can Google Extreme Abuse Survey. And it was 14 people that have been through different types of extreme abuse. And the stuff that's being talked about in these emails, a lot of it was talked about in the Extreme Abuse Survey. So this isn't coming out of nowhere. I mean, sadistic pedophile networks, this is status quo.
Yeah. I think that email is really disturbing about the sucking thing. Then you have references to women as shrimp, references to women as like muffins and steak. You have people talking about how they like white shrimp and not pink shrimp and how disgusted they are by black shrimp. I mean, the one thing I am kind of surprised about, I have to admit, is that they would put so much of this in writing. But I guess they're so used to such a sense of impunity.
I believe that's it. Yeah. Jeffrey Epstein trafficked underage girls for 25 years. And he was he had to spend a little time in a county jail. But the original indictment that was going to be brought against him by the feds in 2008, it was a 60-count indictment. And count 51 was child trafficking. That indictment those indictments would have put Jeffrey Epstein in prison for the rest of his life. But yet he did 13 months. And then when he was doing time in the county jail, he was able to get out during the day. And then there was a little room where his quote unquote legal assistants, he could meet his legal assistants. And that whole thing was very much a joke.
Right. And here's another one. Jeffrey Epstein emailed an unknown individual stating that he loved a torture video shared between the two. The recipient's email signature matches Peter Mendelssohn's, whose name fits pixel for pixel in the reacted names box. I'm in China. I will be in the U.S. second week of May. David Miliband at my table. Do I say hello? Sorry for all the typos. Where are you? Are you okay? I love the torture video.
And Mandelson is another person that's been relieved of all his diplomatic duties.
Right.
So there's been ramifications. I mean, these people got to go to prison, but there has been some accountability for what's in the emails.
Yeah, and it seems like much more in the UK than in the United States.
Larry Summers has been relieved of his duties at Harvard, which should have happened a very long time ago. And we're seeing some other ramifications. But yes, there needs to be much more accountability. Actually, what there really needs to be is indictments. We can do indictments. The FBI declared yesterday that there's no co-conspirators with Epstein and Maxwell. And as I mean, that's so disingenuous and absurd that as Americans, we have to do something, because our government has been aiding and abetting child trafficking, covering this up. If you cover up a crime, you're aiding and abetting. Our government has been aiding and abetting Jeffrey Epstein's child trafficking. Well, it was first reported to the FBI in 1996, and then the Palm Beach Police Department investigated him for a year and put together multiple indictments against him. And that was taken away by the state attorney, and they gave us a really corrupt grand jury that declared Jeffrey Epstein hadn't molested a single child. And at that point, I think that the state knew of at least 17 to 23 Epstein victims, and only 2 of them were called. And one had been molested when she was 14 by Epstein. She was now 16. And one had been molested by Epstein when she was 16 multiple times, and now she was 18. And Lana Bell Lavick, the special prosecutor, just destroyed these girls in that grand jury. And the grand jurors are referring to them as prostitutes. I mean, here's a kid that was molested when she was 14 years old. And I've got the transcripts, and actually your audience go to EpsteinJustice.com, because I give a breakdown, a blow by blow of that very corrupt grand jury.
Then you have very disturbing allegations of hunting people. You have allegations of murder. You have allegations that people were strangled to death.
And that is the end of the public portion of the Nick Bryant. Oh, Katie.
Yeah, I was here.
Here you go.
Yeah, that was the end, as Brad was saying, the end of the public portion of the Nick Bryant interview. And to see that full interview, please do go to patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. That's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. I don't know if it's up there yet, or it will be later.
It will be in 3 minutes.
Oh, in 3 minutes. Yeah, great. Yeah. So that is yeah, and check out Nick's books. Also, I put a link to his website. This was a great show. Disturbing stuff that is happening in the world. We got to keep talking about these stories, like Leqaa Kordia's Leqaa Kordia, who Eric mentioned, who's still in an ICE detention center for nearly a year. Obviously, all the people who Eric represents, we will put links to their cases, because that is extremely disturbing. And get Omar's book. And I think that's all I have to say. Brad, you want to say anything? Oh, and thank you to Fanta Miss Fanta for introducing me to Nick in the first place.
Oh, I didn't know what you were referring to when someone asked what I thought about something.
Me neither.
Oh, okay.
But maybe just life in general.
Yeah.
Anyway.
There's a lot of interesting things, I think, about AI that I've been looking into that we could probably do an entirely other program on. But stuff like essentially these people, like the people that we showed clips of, like the Alex Karp, which I'm sure a lot of people have already seen the other clip of him seemingly like coked out of his mind.
Oh yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, we'll have to show that on another episode, because I'm really exhausted. I'm not usually this tired. So sorry to break down the fourth wall.
Probably most people probably.
Yeah.
feel
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
But reading some really interesting things about, I mean, these people come out, talking about their AI and this and that, when it seems like in a lot of ways, these people have no idea how their AI actually works. And let alone the people that are supposed to be regulating it. They're just focused on giant bags of money signs in their eyes.
Right.
And yeah, but anyway, I just hope everyone's hanging in there.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's about.
Yeah,
the
sorry
best
for
I
this
can
kind of
get.
low energy ending. But,
Well, no, the Bernillery got it, right
oh,
there.
Bradley Buzzkill, that's not nice. Well, for every Bernillery, there's someone asking you for your comments, so don't be discouraged.
Well, next time, whoever wrote that, next time, just let me know what specifically you would want
Yeah.
a thought on.
Yeah. All right. Well, I will see everyone next week, if not before then, because we do these extra streams. And thank you so much, Brad. Thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you so much, Phantom Fanta. Thank you, Nick, Rahma, Omar, Eric, and Nate. Okay. Bye, everyone.
I did everything right and they indicted me.
And I don't know what the I'm doing. Antifa!